The following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to FBC Radio Live. It's right, it's Monday, November the 15th. Halfway through the month of November. We're getting close to Thanksgiving. One of my favorite holidays because I get to spend the weeks leading up to it railing against turkey because it's just terrible food to eat, and it's just disgusting. And anyone who actually thinks they like turkey has just been brainwashed their entire life because of tradition. So, rant over. Good morning, John. How are you doing today?
Good morning. We had this discussion last week. Don't love turkey, but it's with all the other stuff that comes with it on Thanksgiving that I like. Squash, mashed potatoes, stuffing, all the turkey gravy on top, and of course all the pies.
It gets carried by itself, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a game manager.
It's kind of like Patrick Mahomes, then, right?
Well, I wouldn't call him a game manager last night, but I thought he played really well. But maybe Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is probably the turkey of quarterbacks, right? Always had two good receivers with him, good offensive line, great running back, good defensive coach, and Mike Zimmer. So, yeah, we'll call Kirk Cousins the turkey of quarterbacks.
To each his own. No, that was kind of an on the fly segue there. No, I didn't go into that intending to take a jab, and it was a little tongue in cheek. But no, I did intend to rail on turkey though, because again, I do believe that it is only enjoyed because of people have been brainwashed their whole lives, and just that's what they believe. But no, it was a weird Sunday. We were kind of talking about it a little bit before we got on the air here this morning. Some odd outcomes, some odd performances and victories and in defeat. And yeah, it just makes what was already a muddied NFC and AFC even muddier. So I guess I'll ask you this, John. We'll start this way. What stood out to you the most? One thing in particular out of all these games, a performance, a team, a unit, defense, special teams, offense. What was it that stuck out to you the most?
And I'm not a homer. You're the Patriots guy. I'm a Green Bay guy. And so when I compliment the Patriots, it's earned. When I criticize them, I think it's also earned. The Patriots were the most impressive team yesterday, top to bottom. Considering that I picked Cleveland to win the Super Bowl, I'd like to have that pick back now that we're in the middle of November. Not only is Baker Mayfield just an average quarterback, and he can't play from behind. That's obvious. That entire operation, with the exception of Bill Callahan, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the business, is a disaster. I mean, you saw the complete difference between the two teams on the sideline as much as on the field. I mean, we all agree Bill Belichick is the best coach in the NFL. Kevin Stefanski is the reigning NFL coach of the year. Did you ever see a coach who wanted to be there less than him yesterday? He didn't move. Like, did they make any adjustments after the first quarter? I mean, they took the opening kickoff, went down and scored, and the Patriots matched that. And from that point on, it was just incredibly one-sided. So I would say that the Patriots were the most impressive team yesterday. And I'll be honest with you, I know you're more a Mac Jones guy than I am. He impressed the hell out of me yesterday. His touch, timing, ability to throw receivers open, anticipation throws, that was elite yesterday. I mean, he looked like Drew Brees in his prime, in terms of just being very, very accurate and in command of the offense. That was damn impressive yesterday. I mean, some of those throws were just absolute perfection. The offensive line has come together. That team looks really good right now.
I'm glad you said Drew Brees-like, because actually the second you said that, it reminded that touchdown pass to Kendrick Bourne, I think might be his best throw of the entire season. It was put in a spot that only his receiver could turn and make the play on in a very tight coverage. I believe he was double covered too. And it was kind of that moment where, because we've talked about it before, and as much as I'm obviously a Patriot fan and I try to keep some objectivity, and not all. I mean, clearly I'll never sit here and say that I'm completely objective when it comes to the Patriots, but I've tried to take a very cautious approach with Mac Jones. Let the kid develop. I don't want to get too high and I don't want to get too low because at the end of the day, he's just a kid. But it's getting harder and harder not to see that he's more than just a guy under center. And I think the Patriots, much to the chagrin, excuse me, of many other fan bases around the league, they got a pretty damn good quarterback, and he really showed out yesterday. Again, that was a complete team effort from top to bottom from the Patriots. So wasn't all on Mac Jones. I mean, when you hold Cleveland, despite all their issues, to just 7 points, all of which coming in that first drive, yeah, well, your defense played pretty damn well, including having another a pretty big turnover that almost resulted in their third straight game with a touchdown, defensive touchdown. But it was very impressive. Bill Belichick, he's been putting on. I know he gets far more criticism than he's ever deserved. I think he gets again, kind of like a Tom Brady interception. Mistakes he makes get weighted far differently than his successes and other coaches' mistakes, and rightfully so. I mean, when you're
higher for him,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So
in NFL history. I mean,
yeah. Well, there's
although I don't agree with that sentiment, I think he's certainly one of the 3 to 5 greatest.
Yeah,
coaches.
but at that point, it's whether he's 1 or 3. I mean, he's still the bar is set so high, so
right.
it comes with unrealistic expectations. But at the same time, like he's been putting on he's been coaching this team up, and I think it's starting to really like he said in the past, you really start to find out who you are as a team around Thanksgiving. And what do you know? Guess what? Thanksgiving's about 10 days away, so I think this team is starting to figure out who they are, and if you're a Patriot fan, you better be pretty excited because they look like more than just a sneak-in playoff. I'm getting pretty close, John. Pretty close, based on the competition, based on the current state of the conference. Getting pretty close to calling them the best team in the AFC, and I have to get myself checked every time I think about that. But the results come back, well, that's not that unrealistic of a statement to make at this point, because who's played more consistently? I'm not talking about who has the best offense, defense, special teams, quarterback, whatever. Which team has played more consistently from start to finish this season? And it'd be hard pressed to not say the Patriots in the AFC, of course.
Yeah, I mean they're right up there. I mean, I would still put Tennessee above them. They do have a better record, 8-2 compared to 6-4, and they have some really nice wins. But they also lost to the Jets, the team the Patriots handily beat twice. Yeah, they're right up there. And look, I would say that Tennessee is the best team in the AFC right now, but they don't have their best player, and we're not sure if he's ever going to come back this year. As far as Buffalo, those 2 games against Buffalo are going to be monumental because I think it's imperative to win the division. Because if you win the division, you get a home game, and then you're on. If you can win that game, you're on to the divisional round. So I think that that's something that the Patriots don't necessarily have to do, but it would certainly make the road a lot easier than having to win 3 road games. Although they're 4-0 on the road this year, it's still, that's a daunting task. So I think that that's important. If they can, they split with Buffalo, and it comes down to the rest of the schedule. Buffalo still has to play Tampa this year, which is going to be a tough out for them. So I think it's imperative they win the division. But yeah, I mean they're trending in the right direction. I mean they're clicking on all cylinders, offensively and defensively. So yeah, why not? And again, 3 of their losses were 1-play losses. I mean the New Orleans game was thinker, and everyone seems to have one of those, or 2 of those a year. But the other 3 losses were right there for them. I mean, one in overtime to a really good Dallas team, one down the stretch against Tampa, and the other one losing by 1 point to Miami. So yeah, they've been consistent in 9 of those 10 games without question.
Well, and think about it. I mean, I know you mentioned Buffalo, but they have Atlanta on Thursday, who got absolutely waxed by Dallas yesterday, 43-3. So I thought Atlanta coming into the week was playing pretty well. I didn't almost just instinctually went curb your enthusiasm there, but no, they got absolutely wow. I mean, I think at one point I had to look to make sure that it wasn't a typo, but I'm pretty sure in the second quarter it was 3. So Dallas obviously let up a bit. Um, but so they have Atlanta this Thursday. Very quick turnaround. They could catch the Atlanta Falcons, who I don't think are necessarily a great team. I think they can play up to just about any level. They're capable of doing that. It doesn't mean it happens all the time, and it doesn't mean that they're a good team. It just means that they're pretty sporadic. And the Patriots have an opportunity to kind of, chalk up another victory because you mentioned Buffalo. But guess who they have on 10 days rest? The Tennessee Titans coming out
Mhm.
of this mini bye week. So all of a sudden, you look at this Patriots team and they've won 4 in a row. I know it seems like a tall task at this point, but you win the next 3 games. I think they're going to be favored against Atlanta. I think at this point you can
They are. They're a
defi-
4-point favorite.
yeah, you can
Kind of
definitively say that the
fine.
Patriots are
Yeah.
better than the Falcons. So then all of a sudden you get the Titans, who by no means are that's the thing. They had the best record in the AFC, but this isn't like in years past where that team was just really above and be. We've seen it with the Colts. We've seen it obviously with the Patriots. We've seen obviously the Chiefs take a run at it. The Titans aren't one of those teams right now, and they struggled a bit with New Orleans. Just like a lot of teams seem to do on certain weeks. Um, so this isn't a team that's certainly a heavy favorite over the Patriots. So all of a sudden, you have we could be talking here at the end of this month, John, as the Patriots having potentially a share of the best record in the conference and tiebreakers over not only Cleveland and the Chargers, 2 of their closer wild card competitors, but they're currently 5-1 in the AFC conference. That's huge. They still have 2 games against Buffalo and that game against Tennessee. Say you split with Buffalo and beat Tennessee, you're pretty much in the driver's seat for whatever you want in that conference, assuming they continue to just progress like they have been. And right now, there doesn't seem like any indication that they're going to just revert, all of a sudden turn around and go back to being mediocre. So, very exciting if you're a Patriot fan, and certainly if you're a Patriot player, because if it turns out that the post Tom Brady rebuild uh, rough period lasts, I don't know, what, 23 actual NFL weeks, you're doing pretty good because I think a lot of people were hoping it lasted quite a bit longer than that.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're obviously headed in the right direction, but I'm going to go Bill Belichick on you and just concentrate on Thursday's game for now, because this is an absolute trap game. It's a Thursday
Oh
night
yeah, oh
on
yeah,
the
yep.
and how many times have we seen this in the NFL? Team A wins 45-7 on Sunday. Team B loses 43-3 on Sunday. Team A travels to Team B on Thursday night, and everyone just assumes that Team A is going to win handily, and it becomes a dogfight and maybe even an upset. It's the way the league works, right? Look at Dallas; they were god awful against Denver. They were impressive against Atlanta, and Denver and Atlanta pretty similar teams, right? They're like 500 type teams that from week to week can be good, but can also be god awful, which kind of sums up about 2/3 of the league, right? I mean, there's no great team in the NFL right now, and then maybe there will be when we get to February, but there'll be somebody playing better than everyone else that will be crowned Super Bowl 56 champions. But right now, I don't see any team that looks foolproof. But the Patriots right now have very, very few weaknesses. I mean, the most impressive part to me is the offensive line has come together.
Mhm.
I've told you this many times. If I ever had the good fortune of being a general manager for an NFL team, besides obviously trying to find your quarterback, 2 units that I would want to have the most talent and depth would be the offensive line and the secondary. First of all, they're the biggest units on a football team. They're also, to me, the most important. I mean, if your offensive line is good, your quarterback can play, you can run the football, you can do a lot of really good things. And if your secondary is good, you can always keep explosive plays to a minimum and get teams off the field and maybe hold them to field goals. And right now, both of those units, which we thought at the beginning of the year were going to be strengths,
Mhm.
right? We thought that the offensive line and the secondary were probably the strongest parts of this team, are both starting to perform like that.
Well, the thing too is especially about the secondary. We assume that with Stephon Gilmore, they're a
Right.
damn good unit without him, and that's not a addition by subtraction. This is just a, oh wow, you get rid of arguably your best overall defensive player. I mean, again, I think it's arguably, I don't even know if I believe that, but he certainly was one of your top 3 defensive players, I would say, correct? Currently, even
Oh, it's
like, yeah. So,
him and Matt Judon would be your 2 best
yeah.
players. Judon right now, Judon's their best player on the team right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think so too.
Including the kicker doesn't miss. So, yeah, I mean, but Matt Judon's the best player right now. He's in contention for defensive player of the year, and certainly he'll
9.5 sacks.
No, he's and that's not even the whole story.
No,
I mean,
yeah. Well, he had half a sack. He was credited for half a sack yesterday. 3 quarterback hits, but anyone watching the game knows he was all over the field. Him, Christian Barmore. I mean, again, the whole Bill having trouble building teams and drafting, and it's funny how quickly that.
He's had a good draft this year.
No, he was phenomenal. Draft. Yeah,
he's nailed this year. Maybe just keep drafting Alabama guys. I mean, that seems to work pretty well. Right?
Ramondre Stevenson, 100 yards yesterday when they needed someone to take some pressure off Mac Jones. He comes in, 20 rushes, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that was exactly what you wanted. So, yeah, pretty impressive performance top to bottom from the Patriots. I'd be hard pressed to disagree with you on that, just because again, it's hard to ignore. First of all, wins of that nature, but just the trajectory that this team is on currently, it's been pretty good for this team. But to your point, Thursday is a trap game. Actually, and I wrote my little kind of thoughts about yesterday. I mentioned that same Thursday is your classic trap game. However, if you're going to be, going into a potential trap game, you're probably feeling good being coached by Bill Belichick in this coaching staff, because if any team's going to be more prepared for something like that, it's going to be the Patriots. And right now, I feel like they're starting to really feel it. And yeah. So, anyways, like I said, a lot of stuff happened. We haven't even mentioned the damn tie. Like, I mean, of course, Detroit at 0-8. They don't win. They don't lose. They tie. So technically, their losing streak is over, but they still not won a game this season. And it just gives me, once again, John, an opportunity to say overtimes never end in the first possession. So all that hoopla a few years ago about it being fair and like a fairness bowl and all that stuff. I mean, good God, that was so silly now. So silly. Because I mean, clearly teams just don't always win. That was just sloppy football. It was ugly. It was just, I don't know. I don't even want to say anything more beyond that, outside of just mentioning that we actually got a tie. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I feel like I've seen Pittsburgh have a few ties in my lifetime. Like, I feel like it's always Pittsburgh and some other team that tie.
Pittsburgh and Green Bay back in 2013 when Rodgers was up at games. Pittsburgh and Green Bay ended up in a tie, which actually helped Green Bay win the division that year because Rodgers came back, final game of the season, beat the Bears, and they won the division at 8-7-1. So yeah, Pittsburgh always does seem to be in these kind of crazy games. The part of it is too is Heinz Field can be a tough place to kick. Extra points get missed. Long field goals don't generally happen at that place. And it also doesn't help Pittsburgh that the morning of the game, your quarterback is out with COVID and Ben Roethlisberger, and he's vaccinated. So, kudos to him for that. But, it's just a weird game. And you know what? Look at Detroit. I mean, they've played 10 games this year. They've been in like 7 of them. I mean, and they look. I'm not a big Dan Campbell fan, but at least the guy looks like he gives a crap, right? Like I just have this is burned in my mind of Kevin Stefanski just standing there yesterday. He never moved from that spot. Now he's a handsome man, looks like George Clooney, but just stood there. Like did he ever go over to the sidelines? Did he ever go over to the bench? That's what Belichick does better than anybody. He actually gets involved in coaches because the beauty about Bill Belichick is he's coached all 3 parts of football. He was a special teams coach. He was a tight ends coach. Obviously a defensive guru. So he kind of knows everything. He's been around forever. So he'll get involved with all of that, right? I mean, I think he lets Josh McDaniels pretty much run the offense, and it's going really well. But Kevin Stefanski just stood there. Like if I'm running the Cleveland Browns, I'm like, were you okay yesterday? Were you just not engaged? I mean, no emotion. And again, I don't need the coach to go over and flip over the Gatorade cups. I don't need that, but I need someone who looks like he gives a crap. At least I'll give Dan Campbell that. I mean, he's a little bit over the top, but at least it looks like he cares if they win or lose.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to earn him too much free will if it keeps going like this. Our good buddy Kyle Sender chimed in saying CFL overtime is greater than NFL overtime, and I disagree. I think NFL overtime is perfect. It still requires elements of football. It doesn't turn it into a gimmick. I'm not quite familiar with all the rules of CFL overtime, but I believe they're very similar. And Kyle, if you're still listening, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Very similar to college in the sense that kind of the gameplay changes. And my thing with overtime, John, and I've talked about this before, especially with hockey, is like I want continuity. I don't want different rules. I don't want different activities, which I like to refer to the shootout as in hockey. They're gimmicks, in my opinion. I don't want that with my overtime. And I'm talking about NFL, NHL, whatever. I don't want any of that. What I want is the closest resemblance to the actual gameplay, with the lone exception being, well, you don't you don't have endless opportunities. If you don't score enough in regulation, well, guess what? The idea of sudden death is appropriate. Now, again, you can't do that in basketball, obviously, because of how the game's played. In baseball, obviously, just the nature of how it is. But in football and in hockey and sports like that, absolutely. Like we've seen it so many times. I mean, all season this season, I'm pretty sure every single overtime game, not only has both teams had possession each, in some cases they've had multiple possessions. So at this point, to change anything about the NFL overtime would be foolish and would just be the NFL getting in the way of themselves. Because it's perfect now. There's no sense to change it. And there was no reason to change it back in 2018 when people made a huge fuss about it. And the reality of it was, and I remember saying this at the time, it just it didn't add up. So I think the stats said, okay, 51% of the time, the team that wins the coin toss wins the game. That wasn't 51% of the time teams win on the first possession, which was people's biggest problem. I think Peter King wrote that column, Fairness Bowl and stuff like that, and I still kind of chuckle at that because the reality of it was, I think it was only 17% of the time teams that won the coin toss won on the first possession. So this idea that it was broken or damaged or a problem was just basically Chiefs fans and people who hated the Patriots getting upset that they went down and scored on their first possession and didn't give, quote unquote, the Chiefs a chance. But anyways, end rant on overtime. I have to get one of those in at least once a week, at least. Sometimes
once a day.
Once a day, whatever.
Once a day, yeah. You daily rant about overtime. Why not? Yeah. I mean, we've had these discussions before, but as far as this game Thursday night for the Patriots, I think that they should win, right? I mean, they're clearly the better team.
Oh, sure.
I think they'll be prepared, all of that fun stuff. But there's always that weird. We've seen it so many times in the NFL. I mean, where you go, my God, that team was horrible last Sunday. The team they're playing was great. It should be an easy game, and who the hell knows what happened. Look at Baltimore, Miami last Thursday.
Yeah.
Everyone expected Baltimore to go down and win, and they didn't. But I think the Patriots will be better prepared than Baltimore, and Miami's defense is better than Atlanta's defense, so I think the Patriots should be in fine shape. But just there's always a little caution to the wind. Those are just strange matchups.
Yeah, well, I think we both sat here and said, getting back to that Pittsburgh Lions game, I think we both sat here and said, oh, it doesn't matter. The Lions are going to lose, and then they end up tying, which again, you're like, like, what do you say? Even without Ben Roethlisberger, I think, okay, maybe Pittsburgh probably still has enough to pretty much take care of this team. And then, hey, pretty sure most people picked Tampa to win at Washington, but, right off the bat, that and I laugh because, look, Brady didn't have a great game. He didn't have a terrible game. I think at the end of the day, he played okay. That team is one of the most undisciplined, successful teams I've ever watched in my life. It's amazing how many stupid little mistakes this team makes on a regular basis. You know what happened on the very first offensive snap of the game for the Buccaneers? last week or
Yeah,
yesterday. They committed a
you were
false
telling me it was a
false
false
start.
start.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a false
that's
start.
bad.
And it's like, how many times can you commit mental errors that hurt your offense? I mean, right then, right off the bat, you start behind. Now it's 1st and 15. They end up going 3 and out, and that's how you start the offense. Then there's penalties, and there's just stupid penalties too. Whether it's holding or whether it's the offensive lineman kind of getting in the face of the defender and getting those stupid unsportsmanlike penalties. It's just undisciplined from top to bottom, and then it really I I laughed, not like comedy laugh, but I laughed at just how the ridiculousness of the comment made by Bruce Arians, who should shoulder the blame for a lot of these issues, but never misses an opportunity to throw his players under the bus, and he did so again yesterday by putting both interceptions. I'm laughing about it now because it's so absurd to even suggest, but putting both of those interceptions on Tom Brady. Now, again, the second one was bad throw, bad decision, whether it was miscommunication between him and Mike Evans, doesn't really matter. He still threw the ball, and it was still off target. So, hey, give him blame for that. But that first interception, John, I'm assuming you saw it, correct? I'm not just, gonna have to. I'll explain it to everyone
Oh,
else.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
It was a perfect
It
throw
was a
that
throw,
the receiver didn't
Yeah.
secure and ended up,
I mean,
spinning around and the ball went up in the air.
You
Yeah.
could have made an argument that it could have been ruled a catch and a fumble. That's how much of so
Right.
the idea that you're putting blame on him for that, I mean, it just kind of goes to show just how much of a kind of a boob that he is sometimes. And it's like I feel like he is almost hurting this team more, not only by not getting this discipline and order, but by just making stupid comments like that. Like, I mean, again, it's like the show is funny and it's all good. He's Uncle Bruce and all that stuff, but it's kind of wearing thin, at least from someone on the outside looking in. So, but yeah, this team isn't obviously perfect. They have some issues. I give Washington credit. I mean, they played very well defensively. I was surprised. I didn't expect it. And then, hats off to them. 10-minute drive and the game. Like, just, I mean, what is it, 19 plays? Like, how do you allow that to happen?
Yeah, no, that was
And guess what?
impressive.
It was aided by a couple penalties, including
Right.
including a offside penalty on 3rd down. Like, how undisciplined of a team do you have to be to commit such a basic? You expect that from the Lions and the Texans when you're sitting there watching Aaron Rodgers go up against those teams, knowing that like we all know he's trying to draw you offside, and you still jump. That's how stupid this team is sometimes, and how undisciplined. And it's frustrating. If you're a Bucks fan, I'd be going nuts, and I'd be blaming Bruce Arians. I mean, for as much blame as Josh McDaniels gets in New England, good God, if Bruce Arians was the coach of that team, I mean, he'd be out in the town square, getting stoned by the townspeople. To go back, I don't know. It's just to me maybe.
Well, I don't.
Go ahead.
I just think if you want to look at the Buccaneers from a macro standpoint, I wonder. Now we spent the offseason talking about people saying they're going to go 17-0, they're better than last year, and all of that stuff. Was it the right decision to bring everybody back? Like, so now the team feels vital. Like, they were 7-5 last year, had a bye week, and then from that point forward, they won 8 straight games, including the Super Bowl. So a lot of these guys who never had success elsewhere are now feeling entitled and maybe didn't work as hard in the offseason. Or sometimes it's good to throw a little bit of a wrench in there so that all the players don't feel secure in their own skin, which is
I agree.
Is kind of what the NFL kind of Belichick did this all the time, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Belichick would drop a few guys and we'd say, why the hell are they doing that? He'd bring other guys in and it worked just to keep everybody on their toes. Like, hey, I know, we're the Super Bowl champs and you're writing a book and you're on a radio show every week and you're making you're on national shows, but let's focus on what we have to do. And again, I don't think of discipline and Bruce Arians in the same sentence.
I think there's a little truth to that. I do think that injuries have played a pretty big role for this team, who last year was relatively injury free. They kind of went. They had some really good injury luck last year. For the most part, for the better part of the last few weeks, they've been playing with second, third string cornerbacks. Richard Sherman off the street, who again he's now back on the shelf. Obviously, Antonio Brown hasn't been there. Rob Gronkowski hasn't been there. Scotty Miller hasn't been there. So, you're talking about three guys that, go back to that Packers game that made a lot of big plays in that game. And look, I mean, I think Brady's good enough, and I think this team is good enough to overcome that. But every so often, you sit there and realize that, like, okay, sometimes injuries catch up to you. So I don't want to necessarily say that they've gotten complacent. I think that is certainly a concern and maybe part of the factor, but I think it's more to do with a combination of trying to overcome these injuries and just kind of poor coaching. Like, you give Bill Belichick this team, and I think they're, you know, in much better shape even with the same injuries. It's just, I just, the combination of yeah, go ahead.
We said that after the Patriots Tampa game. I remember saying, "My Lord, if Bill Belichick and Tom Brady had this roster, they'd go 14-3 or 15-2 and be the clear cut favorite to win the Super Bowl because he would coach those things out of that team." Although the Patriots have had some issues too. I mean, we do remember the first two series against Carolina last week. My Lord, it seemed like every guy on the offense committed a penalty. But you work through those types of things and you don't magnify them. You don't make it worse than what they really are. So yeah, I also think too that I think it's incredibly unfair to Brady to put everything on him, the criticism and at times the praise, but the praise is deserved because he's that great. But can you see the Buccaneers winning a playoff game with him playing average? I don't think so. Last year you could. I don't think you could see that this year. He literally has to carry this team. I mean, I know he's got all these nice weapons, and as you said, Ian Gronkowski's been out. And Brown's been out, and who knows when they come back. I mean, you're talking about older guys with injury concerns. That's never an easy thing to just snap your fingers and say, yeah, he'll be back in week 17 or 18 and be ready for the playoffs. That's not the way football works. I think it's incredibly unfair to just put this all on him. The defense isn't what it was a year ago. They have no running game. They throw the ball 70% of the time. So, Brady's going to have to be exceptional. Now, if you're going to pick a quarterback to be exceptional, there's your guy.
Yeah.
But that's a lot to ask for anyone.
And for the most part, he has. But, it's funny. Like, I know one of the big talking points for much of the season was, and that's why one of the reasons why I kind of fight back at a lot of this Patrick Mahomes stuff is because on the flip side, people go, jump through hoops to kind of soften the blow on what he deserves blame on. And like, so for me, I'm like sitting here thinking, geez, I mean, people were talking about, oh, well, think about all the interceptions Mahomes has thrown that's bounced off the helmet. Well, what we almost saw yesterday, John? We've seen him complete this throw, and it's it's really a great throw for so many reasons because it's a throw if you're throwing it to the right guy. It's a high percentage, good chance you're going to score a touchdown. It's that low to the goal line, basically almost to the ground throw. It's where no one's going to get it but the Patriots receiver. If it's caught, they're going to flop right into the end zone. If it's incomplete, well, guess what? No harm done. You know what we saw yesterday? We saw one of those passes hit Chris Godwin's hand, go through his leg, hit the back of his heel, take a hard right, mind you. just kind of like the magic loogie. And almost land in the hands of Kyle. I think it was Kyle Fuller. And what would have been Brady's third interception, and of the three, I mean, that there would have been two ridiculous, unfortunate plays that just had nothing to do with what Brady did. So I'm sitting there scratching my head, like, I mean, oh my god, like how does that how does that almost happen? And you want to sit there and say, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes has a raw deal. No, Tom Brady has a raw deal. Remember his first two interceptions of the season or whatever it was? Well, one was the Hail Mary, but the other one
the Hail Marys don't even count. That's like missing a 3-pointer at the buzzer from you throw a 75-footer 3-pointer. Yeah, it's like
and then the first one was the one that went into very similar into the breadbasket of Leonard Fournette, and then it bounced and took that hard right. But so like I was like laughing out like after the game too, after hearing what Bruce Arians said. I was like, would he have blamed that one on Tom too? Like, would that have been oh, Tom's going to throw better. Okay, I'm sorry he didn't anticipate the ball taking a weird bounce off not one but two body parts of Chris Godwin to reach the sideline a couple feet away.
Sounds like the Bird Jordan game of horse. Yeah. McDonald's, remember, off the Empire State Building, bounced it off the Chrysler Building, and swish.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean they all have these interceptions where it's not their fault, and then they don't get interceptions that probably should be interceptions because there's a reason those guys in the secondary are back there.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they can't catch the ball. Although I'm really looking forward to this Sunday. Kansas City is hosting Dallas. We're going to see, I'm sure, Trayvon Diggs hooked up against Tyreek Hill quite a bit. There's going to be some explosive plays in that game both ways. If Diggs is the most aggressive corner in football, he's probably going to get burned a few times by Tyreek Hill, but he'll probably pick off a pass at some point because he's ultra aggressive. That's going to be actually a pretty fun game to watch coming up on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, that's my concern with the Bucs. Is maybe just bringing the game back. It's good to tweak the roster just a little bit to keep everybody on their toes. That it's not a done deal. And again, maybe they're just like, well, we've got number 12, so he'll take care of it, which he normally does. I mean, that's
well,
why not? That's a good option to have.
And that's the thing. They ultimately they can finish the season 14-3, and then we'll all sit back and be like, this will just be another blip on the Super Bowl DVD, sort of like what we did with the Patriots for all those years. So this isn't a sound the alarm thing. I saw people. Again, this is how much a mediocre Tom Brady game weighs on everyone. He has plummeted, according to people, out of the MVP race, which again is silly to suggest because that also would entail having to ignore everything else we see, not only from him but from other quarterbacks as well. And this is why we live in such a in the moment reaction type era of media. The reality of it is he's probably still the front runner. Now, again, that lead has shrunk a little bit, but even with a game in hand or having played one fewer game than most of his competition, he's still leading the league in touchdown passes. I think he's just 100 yards off of the passing yards. Again, that's with one fewer game. So this overreaction to what ultimately was a mediocre game from Tom, and he really hasn't had many of them this season. Maybe one other.
He's been fine.
It's funny and just kind of par for the course. We've seen this so many times every single year with Brady. At the end of the day, he could go out and have yet another 4-touchdown game, which he's done multiple times throughout the season, and everything will be all right. But as for other games that obviously were interesting or fascinating, obviously Green Bay hosting Seattle, picking up the 17-0 win. Luckily for Packers, they got those extra points because, as we know, winning a game by only scoring 13 points doesn't count, according to Packers fans. So, you can take a breath, Packers fans. You can actually enjoy that victory. Look, dare I say, Geno Smith and Jordan Love should have played this game.
Nah, maybe Geno Smith.
Seattle
didn't score. I mean, Rodgers was,
he was okay.
He was okay. They won the game. Which was good. I think he's still good at the line of scrimmage, getting them out of certain plays into other plays. And the screen game was excellent yesterday, which I love when they do that because they had two backs that can be very effective in that, and of course AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, and that's a big injury. We'll see how long Aaron Jones is going to be out. He was okay. Russell Wilson was a disaster, which is not unexpected. I mean,
it's second half
came
of the
back
season.
Early from it is second half of the season. But again, he was rehabbing 19 hours a day. My only suggestion was if you're rehabbing 19 hours a day, that means you're only sleeping 4. That's not enough sleep. You need more sleep than that. So maybe you should have slept a little bit. But he's over the top, right? I mean, we agree about Russell Wilson. I mean, he's kind of like him and Aaron Rodgers are like black swan, white swan.
Yeah.
Right? Because one guy is like this kind of miserable, and
both over the top in different ways.
Over the top in different ways, and I think the problem with this, and as anyone that's listening knows, I'm the biggest Aaron Rodgers guy. He, I think, wants to be a guy who can flourish being hated, but he can't.
No,
you get what I'm saying? Like I think deep down he wants to be loved. And I think what happened yesterday is he's leaving the field and he says he was getting teary-eyed, and the fans love him there. And look, what else is there to do in Green Bay but root for the Packers? And they've been fortunate to have two great quarterbacks for 30 years and made them relevant.
Well, technically, they've had 3 great quarterbacks over the last 40. I mean, with a couple blips in between, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had you had Favre and Rodgers. I mean, Favre was a long time ago, but I'm starting to lean he may stay rather than force his way out of there at the end of the year. I don't know. Maybe this COVID thing that he had to deal with, and it's all his fault. No one else's fault. Not that he got COVID, but the way he handled it.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to think maybe he stays, only because I think he really appreciates how much fans do love him there, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, he was okay. He was good enough. I'm more impressed with the defense right now than anything. I mean, that's a damn good defense. Yeah.
Well, and we've seen that here and there from Green Bay throughout the season, that the defense is, it's certainly opportunistic, and it seems to be coming up more and more with bigger plays. I mean, like, look, I mean, against Kansas City, they played really well. I mean, it was kind of lost in the fact that all the other storylines that were going on, and the fact that Green Bay lost. But I think we both believe, had Aaron Rodgers been there, I think there's a much higher likelihood that they actually win that game. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm softening on him not leaving. Honestly, I still think it might be a higher likelihood that he retires than returns. And that's, again, and some of the indications, like, I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and, like, I hate overreacting. I don't know if this is him, because he's been pretty good all season. He's not producing at the level that he was last year. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's falling off. Trust me, I know. I've been fighting that narrative for quite some time. But I think this team is far more of a Aaron Jones centric as opposed to Aaron Rodgers centric. And I know that sounds crazy because, again, Aaron Rodgers is going to get top billing and should get as much attention as possible. But this team goes as Aaron Jones goes. And I think from there it creates all this opportunity for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it helps that you have a great receiver in Devontae Adams, and Aaron Rodgers obviously doesn't turn the ball over. But aside from that, they don't stretch the field that often. It's a lot of really short to intermediate passing, and a lot of it based off the running of Aaron Jones, whether it's by virtue of catching a pass in the backfield or actually rushing the ball. So maybe Aaron Rodgers sees it and says, "Look, as 99% of every quarterback that's ever played this game, save for Tom Brady, eventually, your effectiveness just starts to wane." And I'm not saying that he's not a great quarterback still. I still am putting him and Brady 1 and 2, but maybe he's a little bit slower, or maybe the reaction time's a half second off, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. So now, it's a much more manageable game as opposed to put it on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders and let him win. Again, maybe he sees that and says at the end of the day, I've had enough. Not in I'm fed up with it, but I think we both believe that football is not the most important thing, and that's not a knock. I'm not saying that as a knock. He's just not as psychotic. I think he's a psycho, but I don't think he's as psychotic as Tom Brady when it comes.
I know who you're going to say. No one is.
Exactly.
No one is. I mean, it's almost not healthy, but obviously it's resulted in 7 Super Bowls. Yeah, I think he's got other interests. Obviously, he's got the fiance that's in Hollywood, and he's got Hollywood friends and all of that stuff, and I think he likes all of that. But if I'm him and I want to continue playing, I can't think of a better situation. First of all, he likes his coach.
I agree with that. I think
that's for sure. I think he and Matt LaFleur have a really good relationship. Maybe he's repaired some of the issues with the front office. You've got 2 really good running backs. You've got a good offensive line, and they've played pretty well this year without David Bakhtiari. He should be back soon. Devontae Adams is going to be a free agent. Maybe if Rodgers stays, Adams stays. You've got some nice pieces there, and then you've got a defense that's been really good. And consider the defense playing at that level without their 2 best defensive players. Jair Alexander got hurt in week 4. They expect him to come back. That's a big thing. Zadarius Smith, who's their best front 7 guy, has been out the entire year. He's expected to be back. And now, yesterday, Rashawn Gary got hurt, kind of a gruesome injury. We'll see with that. And of course, as you mentioned, Aaron Jones, who's as big in the passing game as he is in the running game. It appears like he sprained his knee, sprained MCL as opposed to a torn MCL, and he's had that on other occasions. So maybe it's 2 to 4 weeks, and it could be like that blessing in disguise where you give the running back 4 weeks off and he comes back fresher than ever. It's almost like Tennessee. Cross your fingers. If Derrick Henry comes back in the playoffs, and somehow you're the number 1 seed, he's rested, that makes them really that much more difficult. So, that it could be a blessing in disguise somehow. You didn't want to see guys get hurt, but it could work that way.
It's not going to happen because they're going to lose to the Patriots.
The Patriots are going to
Mark my words. I'm already picking that game.
Why not? What I've seen the last 4, what I saw yesterday, and sometimes I'm a little slow to the party, but what I saw yesterday was damn impressive.
Yeah.
That's as good a performance I've seen by any team at any point this season. Like, it was perfect. Especially when you take into account Cleveland took the opening kickoff and marched down the field.
Yeah.
And scored. I'm like, okay, the Patriots can have problems stopping this running game because that Cleveland offensive line is really good. And what does Bill Belichick do? He makes the adjustments, the proper adjustments. Cleveland, after that, scored 0 points. And, I think Belichick defensively is more involved now. I think he really feels Josh McDaniels and now that Mac Jones, and look, I'm not putting Mac Jones in Tom Brady's category, never will, but I think he's got a grasp of that offense. I think he feels comfortable with Josh McDaniels and Mac Jones and the rest of those guys putting the offense together. I think he's getting his hands involved with the defense more and more. We see less of Steven Belichick on the sideline. There was a period of time where every broadcast had defensive play caller Steven Belichick, and the last few weeks we haven't seen that. So maybe that's a sign that Bill said, okay, I gave my assistants a chance to make this work, and it's time for the master to get into the lab and straighten out the problem.
Well, part of that too, and we got to get up there here in just a minute, but part of that too is just, the team in general is just settling down. So he doesn't have to spend so much time with so many individual groups. Now he can kind of step back and realize, because as much as he obviously trusts Josh McDaniels, he's going to be very involved with the start of Mac Jones' career. I mean, that's just what he does. So, but now, kind of to your point, I think he's saying, okay, and he's a great enough coach to know when to get involved and when not to, and maybe when to get involved on the periphery as opposed to in the middle of it. So credit to that, and it looks like the Patriots again. If you're going to ask me, is there any team in the AFC they can't beat? And I'd say absolutely no. So we'll see how that plays out. But
wide open.
All right, that's it. Tonight, who do you got? You got the Rams, or you got the 49ers? And does
Major upset. OBJ's debut will be a dud. I think the 49ers at home, who won 1 out of their last 12 at home. How the hell does that happen? I think Detroit has a better home record over the last year and a half. I think the 49ers come up big. For whatever reason, Shanahan owns McVay at the head. I think he's beaten them the last 4 games. I'll go with the 49ers in what I'd call a mild upset because the Rams are a 4-point favorite. But everyone's just going to expect the Rams to roll. I think the 49ers pull off the upset.
Well, I hope for my fantasy football case that is not true because I really need Odell Beckham Jr. to shine tonight.
Ooh, you got him, huh?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's kind of like the Rams. At first, it was a luxury. Now it's a necessity because my entire bench was out this week. So I really needed OBJ tonight. So let's cross your fingers. If you're a fan of me, you'd be rooting for me to win my fantasy football matchup. I hope. I don't expect that from Chiefs fans, but perhaps other fans from around the league. So thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow, and we will